The Grand Council chamber of the Celestial Dominion hummed with anti-gravity fields and barely contained panic. Supreme Commander Vex'thara, all 7 feet of scaled magnificence, stood before the assembled war council, looking like someone had just told him his favorite battlecruiser had been recalled for a safety inspection. "Let me get this straight," he said, his translator struggling to convey the appropriate amount of disbelief. "We've conquered 417 star systems. We've subjugated the Crovenites, who breathe methane and shoot acid. We've made the Silicon Collective kneel, and those beings are literally made of conscious rock. But these humans, they've held us off for 3 standard cycles." Admiral Korthvan, a floating jellyfish-like creature whose species had mastered faster than light travel before Earth had even cooled, pulsed an uncomfortable shade of purple. "Yes, Supreme Commander. 3 cycles. Correct, sir. And in that time, we've lost how many ships? 47 capital vessels, 219 fighters, and," Korthvan's tendrils drooped, "an entire reconnaissance fleet that we're pretty sure they turned into some kind of orbital brewery." Vex'thara's claws scraped against the command podium, leaving deep grooves in the supposedly indestructible material. Somewhere, a maintenance drone sighed electronically. "A brewery. They're calling it space beer, sir. Reports indicate it's actually quite popular in the outer colonies. Our own soldiers have been buying it." The Supreme Commander's eye stalks twisted in opposite directions, a biological impossibility that only happened when he was truly, monumentally frustrated. This was supposed to be simple. Humanity had barely achieved interstellar flight when the Dominion scouts first detected them. They had primitive energy weapons, laughable shield technology, and their ships looked like they'd been designed by a committee of mad engineers with access to too much caffeine and not enough common sense. And yet, "Show me the latest engagement," Vex'thara commanded, his voice dropping to that dangerous quiet tone that made junior officers update their life insurance policies. The holographic display flickered to life, showing the Kepler 442 system where the 4th Battle Group had attempted what should have been a routine planetary blockade. Vex'thara watched as his ships, beautiful and deadly, moved into perfect formation. Textbook approach. Flawless execution. The humans should have surrendered immediately. Instead, what happened next made his scales itch. The human ships didn't retreat. They didn't surrender. They did something that no military computer in the Dominion's vast database had ever predicted. They played music. Loud, obnoxious music with something called electric guitars, and what the cultural analysts had identified as aggressive percussion. Then they charged. Not in formation. Not following any tactical doctrine known to 17,000 years of galactic warfare. They just went for it. One ship, a frigate that had clearly been in too many fights and held together with what appeared to be optimism and spare parts, rammed straight into a Dominion dreadnought, while broadcasting what the translation matrix called a rather rude gesture involving a specific finger. The dreadnought's shields held. Barely. But in the chaos, 3 other human vessels had flanked the formation, deployed something they called the Kentucky Surprise, which turned out to be several thousand tons of kinetic projectiles that were, technically speaking, just very angry rocks moving very, very fast, and disabled 6 ships before retreating through a debris field that should have been impossible to navigate. They lost the frigate. The humans seemed unbothered by this fact and named their next vessel Revenge Tour Part 2. "Turn it off," Vex'thara muttered. "I've seen enough." "Sir, if I may?" Science. Coordinator Plinth, a being of pure energy contained in a sophisticated field generator, flickered nervously. "I've been analyzing human combat behavior, and I believe I've identified the core issue. Please, enlighten me." The sarcasm could have stripped paint off a hull. "They don't fight to win, sir. They fight because they find it. This entertaining." The entire council chamber fell silent. Even the environmental systems seemed to hold their breath. "Entertaining," Vex'thara repeated slowly, as if testing the word for poison. "Yes, sir. Our psychological profiles indicate that humans possess an unusually high tolerance for risk, an almost pathological stubbornness, and a concerning tendency to and I quote from their own military documentation, "Do it for the story." Do it for the story? They want to tell their offspring about it later, sir. Apparently, this is a significant motivating factor in their decision-making process. Vex'thara felt a headache forming behind his third eye. You're telling me that we're losing battles because they want good anecdotes? In essence, yes. Right. Fine. Wonderful. The Supreme Commander's tail lashed, knocking over a ceremonial vase that was older than most civilizations. Nobody moved to clean it up. We need better intelligence. We need to understand how they think, how they organize themselves, who leads them, what's their command structure. Surely they have some kind of emperor, president, hive mind, something we can target? That's complicated, sir. Complicated how, exactly? Admiral Korthvan pulsed an unhappy shade of gray. We've identified multiple leadership structures. They have approximately 197 separate nation-states, each with their own governments, militaries, and apparently very strong opinions about something called proper tea preparation. So we target all the governments. We've tried, sir. The problem is that even when we eliminate leadership, humans just keep going. They have this concept called chain of command, but it's less of a chain and more of a suggestion. When the person in charge dies, someone else just takes over, sometimes multiple someones. Occasionally, they argue about who's in charge while simultaneously fighting us. It's remarkably efficient in a completely chaotic way. Vex'thara's diplomatic training was the only thing preventing him from screaming. So what you're telling me is that we're fighting an enemy that has no central leadership, no unified command, and treats warfare like a recreational activity. That's an accurate summary, yes, sir. This is ridiculous. There has to be someone making decisions, someone coordinating their efforts, someone we can negotiate with, threaten, or, if necessary, eliminate. Find out who really runs humanity. I want names, positions, locations. I want to know who I need to talk to so we can end this absurd conflict before they turn any more of our battle groups into novelty drinking establishments. The council members exchanged nervous glances, which was impressive considering half of them didn't have conventional faces. Sir, Plenth ventured carefully, we could attempt a diplomatic mission, send an envoy to Earth itself, demand an audience with their highest authority. It would be unconventional, but the humans do seem to enjoy theatrical gestures. Fine. Yes. Do it. Vex'thara waved a claw dismissively. Send our best diplomatic team. Someone who speaks their languages, understands their customs. Make it clear that we're there for serious negotiations, not another one of their so-called misunderstandings that somehow always ends with our ships covered in industrial adhesive. And for the love of the eternal void, make sure they know we're coming. I don't want another incident like the Proxima colony where they thought we were, what did they call it? Surprise. Party crashers, sir. Yes. That. No more of that. 3 standard. Days later, the diplomatic vessel Harmonious Understanding approached Earth. The ship had been carefully designed to project peace, sophistication, and cultural superiority. It gleamed in the sunlight, its hull engraved with the treaties of 1,000 conquered worlds, its approach broadcasted on every frequency known to galactic civilization. Ambassador Threlkoth, chosen for his legendary patience and 70 years of diplomatic experience, stood at the observation port, watching the blue-green planet grow larger. He'd negotiated peace treaties with hive minds, brokered trade deals with entities that existed in 7 dimensions, and once convinced a species of genocidal machines that pottery was a more fulfilling hobby than genocide. Humans couldn't possibly be that difficult. His communication officer, a young Quellan named Murthet, chirped nervously. Sir, we're receiving multiple transmissions from the planet. Approximately 4,000 separate sources. 4,000. They appear to be news organizations, sir. They all want exclusive interviews. Several are offering what they call book deals. One is asking if you'd be interested in something called a reality show. Threlkoth pinched the bridge of his nose, a gesture he'd picked up from studying human body language. It seemed appropriate. Ignore them. Connect me with their planetary government. The United Nations, correct? Yes, sir. Establishing connection now. The view screen flickered, and a human face appeared. Female, middle-aged by their standards, wearing what the database identified as business formal attire. She smiled, showing teeth. The database had warned him about that. Humans showed teeth for both aggression and friendliness, which struck Threlkoth as unnecessarily confusing. Ambassador Threlkoth, welcome to Earth. I'm Secretary General Maria Santos. We've been expecting you. Secretary General Santos, thank you for receiving us. I come seeking an audience with your supreme leader to discuss terms of peace between our peoples. Santos's smile didn't waver, but something in her eyes suggested she was trying not to laugh. Our supreme leader. Right. Yes. That's an interesting question, Ambassador. How is that a question? Surely you know who governs your species? Oh, we have governments, plural. Lots of them. But if you're asking who leads humanity. Santos paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. That's more philosophical than practical. Threlkoth felt his patience, legendary though it was, beginning to fray around the edges. Secretary General, with respect, we've been at war for 3 years. Someone must be coordinating your military efforts. Someone must have the authority to negotiate peace. Who is that person? Santos leaned back in her chair, her expression shifting to something that looked almost mischievous. Ambassador, if you really want to understand humanity, if you really want to know what drives us, what makes us tick, what you're actually up against, I can show you. But I have to warn you, it's not what you're expecting. Nothing about your species has been what I expected, Secretary General. Please, show me. All right. But remember, you asked for this. The screen split, showing what appeared to be archived footage from Earth, somewhere in the African continent. A dry, sparse landscape, rocky outcroppings. And there, in the center of the frame, was a creature. It was small, stocky, black and white fur, digging in the dirt with claws that looked far too large for its body. This, Santos said, her voice taking on a tone of reverent amusement, is a honey badger. Scientific name, Mellivora capensis. And if you want to understand humanity, if you want to know who we are at our core, what spirit guides our decisions, this is it. Threlkoth stared at the screen. That's an animal. A small, relatively harmless-looking animal. Watch. The footage continued. A snake appeared, venomous, deadly. It struck the honey badger directly. The honey badger stumbled, fell over, and for a moment, Threlkoth thought it was dead. Then it got up, and it ate the snake. That's not possible, Threlkoth muttered. The venom should have killed it. Should have. Yes. The honey badger doesn't care. It gets bit, it passes out for a few minutes, it wakes up, and it finishes what it started. Now watch this. The screen changed, showing different footage. The same species of creature, this time confronting a lion, not running, not hiding. The honey badger, this tiny animal, charged at something 10 times its size and made it back down. Now this one, Santos continued, clearly enjoying herself. The footage showed a honey badger breaking into a fortified enclosure, solving what humans called puzzles, using tools, escaping from what should have been secure containment repeatedly. And this, another clip, is one fighting off 6 wild dogs while eating their food. Not its food. Their food. It just decided it wanted that particular meal and took it. Threlkoth watched, transfixed and horrified in equal measure, as the compilation continued. Honey badgers attacking things they had no business attacking. Honey badgers refusing to die when they absolutely should have died. Honey badgers demonstrating problem-solving skills, tool use, and what could only be described as absolute fearlessness bordering on suicidal confidence. Secretary General, he said slowly, please tell me you're not suggesting that humanity is led by these creatures. Santos's grin widened. Led by? No, Ambassador. We are them. That's what I'm trying to tell you. You wanted to know who leads humanity, what drives us, what makes us fight the way we fight. Look at that animal. Too stubborn to die. Too aggressive to back down, smart enough to find a way, and absolutely, completely convinced that it can take on anything, no matter how big, how dangerous, or how impossible the odds. That's absurd. Is it? Think about it. You've been fighting us for 3 years. How many times have we done things that should have been impossible? How many times have we taken hits that should have ended us, and just kept coming? How many times have your tactical computers predicted our surrender, only for us to do something completely irrational that somehow works? Threlkoth's mind raced through the battle reports, the tactical analyses, the psychological profiles. The humans who rammed shields they couldn't break. The colony that held out for 6 months against a siege by literally eating rocks processed through jury-rigged synthesizers. The pilots who flew damaged ships into situations that their own computers refused to plot courses for, insisting they'd figure it out. By the void, he whispered. You're all insane. Maybe, Santos agreed cheerfully. Or maybe we're just honey badgers who learned to build spaceships. Either way, Ambassador, that's who you're fighting. That's who you've been trying to conquer. And now that you know. She leaned forward, her smile never wavering but her eyes going sharp as quantum blades. Do you really want to keep trying? The transmission ended, leaving Threlkoth staring at his own reflection in the darkened screen, trying to process what he'd just learned. Murthed's voice broke the silence. Sir, what should I tell the Supreme Commander? Threlkoth continued staring at the screen, watching Earth rotate peacefully below them, imagining 8 billion honey badgers in human form, all thinking they could take on anything, all too stubborn to quit, all ready to do completely ridiculous things for no better reason than it would make a good story later. Tell him, Threlkoth said quietly, that we need to seriously reconsider our strategic options. Sir, and tell him to watch his back around the orbital brewery. I'm starting to suspect it wasn't an accident. Supreme Commander Vex'thara watched the recording 3 times before he finally accepted that his most experienced diplomat wasn't suffering from deep space psychosis. The honey badger footage played on loop in his private quarters, while he contemplated whether his entire military career had been leading up to the universe's most elaborate joke. A mammal, he said to nobody in particular. We're being compared to prey animals by a species that idolizes a mammal. His personal aide, a cautious brevnik named Sol, kept a respectful distance. The cultural analysis team has verified the Secretary General's claims, sir. Humans do genuinely admire this creature. There are approximately 12,000 video compilations dedicated to it on their information network, several scholarly studies, and what appears to be an entire subculture devoted to its behavioral patterns. Vex'thara pulled up the relevant files. Academic papers with titles like Fearless Foraging, Risk Assessment in Mellivora Capensis, and Tool Use and Problem Solving in Mustelids. But also, disturbingly, human entertainment programs with names like Honey Badger Don't Care and Why You Should Never Fight a Honey Badger, which had been viewed billions of times. They turned an animal into a philosophy, he muttered. It appears so, sir. An aggressive, borderline deranged animal that attacks things it shouldn't, survives things it can't, and apparently has the memory of a vindictive elder god. The research does indicate remarkable intelligence and memory retention, yes sir. Vex'thara closed the files and turned to face his aide. Sul, in your honest opinion, what are our actual chances of conquering Earth through conventional military force? Sul's antennae twitched nervously. Mathematically, sir, if we committed our entire fleet, overwhelming force, scorched earth tactics, 73% success rate, and the other 27%? They do something we haven't predicted, turn our own weapons against us, or convince a third of our forces to defect because they're offering better retirement benefits and something called Taco Tuesday. That actually happened, didn't it? The defection, an entire garrison on Titan, sir. The tacos were apparently exceptional. The Supreme Commander's tail hit the floor with a thud that rattled the furniture. We can't keep fighting them. The resource drain is unsustainable. The morale damage is catastrophic. Half the fleet thinks humans are hilarious, a quarter thinks they're terrifying, and the rest have started a betting pool on how long until someone gets turned into a beverage station. So, what's the alternative, sir? We talk. Properly this time. Not threats, not demands, Not the usual conquest protocol. We actually negotiate like they're equals. Saul's color shifted to shocked orange. Sir, the High Council would never approve such a radical departure from doctrine. We've never treated a level 3 civilization as equals. The High Council isn't out here losing ships to flying scrap heaps piloted by maniacs who think ramming is a valid tactic. Vex'thara snapped. Set up another meeting with Secretary General Santos. Tell her I'm coming personally. And Saul? Find out what humans consider appropriate diplomatic gifts. If we're doing this, we're doing it right. 4 days later, the Supreme Commander's personal shuttle descended toward United Nations headquarters in New York. The city sprawled beneath them, a chaotic mess of architecture that somehow worked, despite violating every aesthetic principle the Dominion held sacred. Vex'thara had seen prettier garbage heaps, and yet, something about it felt alive in a way that most Dominion cities didn't. The landing area was surrounded by human military forces, but their weapons were lowered. A good sign, or possibly a trap. With humans, it was genuinely difficult to tell the difference. Secretary General Santos waited at the foot of the shuttle ramp, flanked by a dozen advisors, and what appeared to be several hundred journalists being held back by barriers and stern-looking security personnel. Supreme Commander, Santos said, extending her hand in the human greeting gesture. Welcome to Earth. I appreciate you coming in person. Vex'thara studied the offered hand, then carefully took it, mimicking the shaking motion he'd seen in training videos. Secretary General Santos, thank you for agreeing to this meeting. I bring gifts, as is customary in human diplomatic tradition. He gestured, and 2 aides brought forward a container of synthesized platinum and a data core containing the complete works of Dominion literature spanning 4,000 years. Santos accepted them graciously, then smiled. We also have gifts. Fair warning, they're a bit more personal than platinum. A human aide stepped forward carrying a simple wooden box. Inside were bottles of something amber-colored, what appeared to be preserved food items, and a small, carefully framed photograph. Kentucky bourbon, aged 20 years, Santos explained. Earth's finest, homemade jam from my grandmother's recipe, and that photo is from our archives. The first human spacecraft to achieve faster-than-light travel. The crew signed it for you. They wanted you to know they respect a worthy opponent. Vex'thara stared at the photograph. 5 humans in flight suits, grinning at the camera like they'd just played an excellent prank rather than achieved a technological miracle. One had drawn a small symbol next to their signature, a crude representation of a honey badger. They're mocking me, he said, though without the anger he'd expected to feel. Actually, no, Santos corrected gently. That's Commander Riley, lost her left arm in the Battle of Europa, got a cybernetic replacement, and was back in combat 2 months later. The honey badger is her personal emblem. She thinks you'll appreciate the irony. She fought us with one arm for 2 months before the replacement, yes. Refused medical leave. Said, and I quote, "Those scaly bastards aren't going to shoot themselves." Santos's expression softened. Commander, we've been fighting for 3 years. Thousands dead on both sides. Millions of credits spent. And for what? Neither of us is backing down. Neither of us is going to back down. So maybe it's time we stopped trying to make each other quit and started figuring out how to coexist. Vex'thara followed Santos into the UN building, through corridors lined with flags from nations he'd never heard of, past humans who stared at him with expressions ranging from curiosity to hostility, to what might have been respect. The conference room was deliberately neutral, furnished with adjustable seating that could accommodate multiple biologies. Already present were representatives from a dozen human nations, several looking like they'd rather be shooting at him than talking to him. Let's be direct, Vex'thara began, settling into a seat designed for his physiology. My civilization has conquered 417 star systems. We have technology centuries beyond yours. We have ships that could glass your planet from orbit. And yet, here I sit, negotiating. Because in 3 years of conflict, you've proven something I didn't think possible. What's that? Asked a human general, an older man with enough medals to qualify as armor plating. That victory isn't just about superior technology or numbers. It's about will, and yours is unbreakable. Possibly pathological, but unbreakable nonetheless. Several humans laughed. The general, whose nameplate read Martinez, grinned. Commander, my grandfather fought in World War II. My great-great-great-grandfather fought in something called the Emu War, where Australian forces lost a military engagement against large birds. We've been fighting ridiculous odds since we climbed down from trees. It's kind of our thing. The Emu War, Vex'thara repeated slowly. You lost to birds? Large, aggressive, surprisingly tactical birds, Martinez clarified, completely seriously. But we learned from it. Adapted. Came back stronger. That's what we do. Santos leaned forward. Commander, here's what we're proposing. No surrender. No subjugation. A different arrangement entirely. She activated a holographic display showing star charts. The galaxy is big. Really big. You control a chunk of it. We're expanding into another chunk. Instead of fighting over territory neither of us desperately needs, we establish boundaries, trade agreements, and mutual defense pacts. You want an alliance? Vex'thara's scales rippled with surprise. After 3 years of war? We want to stop wasting resources killing each other when we could be making money together. Santos corrected. You have technology we want. We have resources and manufacturing capacity you need. Plus, let's be honest, having humans as friends is probably better than having humans as enemies. Debatable, muttered one of the Dominion advisors. We heard that, Martinez said cheerfully. And you're right to be cautious. We're unpredictable, aggressive, and we hold grudges. But we're also loyal, innovative, and once we commit to something, we see it through. Those are valuable traits in an ally. Vex'thara considered this. The tactical part of his brain screamed warnings about trusting humans. The strategic part suggested that continuing the war would bankrupt the Dominion within 5 years. And a small, tired part that sounded suspiciously like common sense whispered that maybe, just maybe, this was the best possible outcome. What about reparations? He asked. Territorial disputes? The orbital brewery that used to be my reconnaissance fleet? We'll discuss all of it, Santos assured him. Line by line, detail by detail. It'll take months, maybe years, but we'll figure it out. We're both stubborn enough to see it through. And if negotiations break down, Martinez's grin turned sharp. Then we go back to shooting at each other. Both sides lose more ships, and we're right back here in another 3 years having the same conversation. Or, we could skip that part and move straight to the profitable partnership phase. The negotiations lasted 6 weeks. Vex'thara learned more about humanity in those weeks than in 3 years of combat. He learned that they argued about everything, even when they agreed on the basic premise. He learned that their idea of quick lunch involved 45 minutes and at least 3 different food items. He learned that they had a disturbing fondness for caffeinated beverages, and that depriving them of said beverages was considered a war crime in most human cultures. He also learned that once they committed to an agreement, they honored it obsessively. Every clause was debated, refined, and documented with a thoroughness that impressed even Dominion bureaucrats. The final treaty was 4,000 pages long and covered everything from trade tariffs to mutual defense obligations to a specific clause about humanity getting to keep the orbital brewery because, quote, we built it, we're keeping it, and the beer is actually helping your soldiers' morale anyway. The signing ceremony was broadcast across both human and Dominion space. Vex'thara stood next to Santos, both of them holding archaic writing instruments because humans insisted that important documents should be signed with ink. To peace, Santos said, offering her hand one final time. To profitable stubbornness, Vex'thara replied, taking it. The room erupted in applause, human and alien alike. Outside, across Earth, celebrations began. In orbit, the crew of the orbital brewery added a new variety to their menu, calling it Peace Lager and donating all proceeds to a fund for war veterans on both sides. 3 months later, Vex'thara stood in his office reviewing the first joint human-Dominion trade mission reports. The venture was wildly successful, mostly because humans were terrifyingly good at commerce and had convinced half the Dominion fleet to buy Earth products within 2 weeks. Ambassador Threlkoth appeared on his view screen, calling from a human cultural exchange program. "Sir, you need to see this. If it's another honey badger video, I've seen enough." "No, sir. It's the cultural integration report. Humans have started teaching Dominion children their games. Specifically, one called dodgeball. That doesn't sound concerning." "Sir, it's basically ritualized combat training disguised as recreation. Our children are developing faster reflexes, better spatial awareness, and significantly more aggressive negotiation tactics." Vex'thara pulled up the footage. Dominion children and human children playing together, laughing, competing, learning from each other. One young Quellan successfully dodged 3 throws in a row, then caught the 4th ball and eliminated an opponent. The victorious chirp that followed was pure triumph. "They're teaching our children to be like them," Threlkoth said, though he didn't sound upset. "In a generation, we're going to have young Dominion citizens with human attitudes. Is that a bad thing?" The ambassador paused. "I don't know, sir. But it's certainly going to be interesting." Vex'thara closed the file and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, humans were probably doing something inadvisable and making it work through sheer stubborn determination. The Dominion had spent millennia conquering the galaxy through superior technology and overwhelming force. Maybe it was time to try something different. Maybe it was time to learn from the honey badgers. He pulled up the personnel files and began drafting a proposal for a new military training program, one that emphasized adaptability, creative thinking, and what humans called thinking outside the box. The High Council would hate it. Perfect. 6 months after the treaty signing, Commander Riley visited the Dominion homeworld as part of a military exchange program. She arrived at the Supreme Military Academy with her cybernetic arm prominently displayed, wearing a flight suit with a honey badger patch on the shoulder. The cadets stared at her like she was a particularly dangerous exotic animal. "Good morning," she said through a translator. "I'm Commander Patricia Riley, Earth Defense Force, and I'm here to teach you how humans fight. First lesson, everything your tactical computer tells you is impossible is actually just difficult. Second lesson, difficult things are just things nobody's tried hard enough yet. Third lesson, when in doubt, do something so stupid the enemy can't possibly predict it." Questions? Every hand in the room went up. Riley grinned. "Perfect. Let's start with the story of how I rammed a Dominion cruiser with a damaged frigate while playing classical music and drinking coffee. Take notes. This'll be on the test." Back on Earth, Secretary General Santos received a message from Vex'thara. It was brief, direct, and utterly unexpected. "Secretary General, I believe I owe you an apology. When we first met, you tried to explain humanity through the lens of a small, aggressive mammal, and I thought you were mocking me. I understand now that you were warning me. You were showing me exactly what I was up against. A species that refuses to die, refuses to quit, and refuses to accept that anything is truly impossible. The Dominion sought to conquer you. Instead, you're teaching us how to be better than we were. I'm not sure whether to thank you or fear you. Possibly both. Respectfully, Supreme Commander Vex'thara." Santos read the message twice, then composed her reply. "Commander, there's an old Earth saying, if you can't beat them, join them. I'm glad you chose the latter. As for whether to thank us or fear us, I recommend both. We're friends now, and human friendship is just as intense as human enmity. Welcome to the chaos. Try the bourbon. Secretary General Maria Santos." She sent the message, then pulled up footage from the joint military exercises happening in the Kepler system. Human and Dominion forces training together, sharing tactics, learning from each other's strengths. In the footage, a Dominion fighter executed a maneuver that would have been considered recklessly dangerous 6 months ago, threading through an asteroid field at speeds that made computers protest. The human instructor's voice came through clearly on the recording. "Beautiful. That's the spirit. You're thinking like a honey badger now." Santos smiled and closed the file. The galaxy would never be quite the same. 2 civilizations. One ancient and powerful, one young and chaotic, learning to work together instead of tearing each other apart. And somewhere in the African savanna, completely oblivious to its impact on interstellar politics, a honey badger dug through a termite mound, fought off a jackal, got stung by bees, passed out briefly, woke up, ate the honey anyway, and went about its day with the same fearless determination that had somehow become the operating philosophy of an entire species. The universe had tried to teach humanity caution. The universe had thrown impossible odds at them. The universe had done everything it could to make them quit. The universe had clearly never met a honey badger. And now, neither had the Dominion.